is building moss fossils, which is a replicate of the bryosphere, which the bryosphere is essentially any sort of small ecosystem that is based around the scaffolding of mosses, the primary producer, and then all the little critters, insects, fungi, bacteria, microarthropods that live in the bryosphere. So the students are asking questions about springtail health as well as moss health, and they were given the option after learning about the ecology and the food web whether or not they wanted to test springtails or mosses. And so this class is testing how mosses react to different environments. One thing that we did was make sure that they really understand controlled experiments. So last year's classes were able to do a really great controlled experiment where their question was, what's the best artificial environment for a springtail? So they used charcoal, which is what we use in the lab to rear springtails. So they use charcoal, they use yeast as a food source, they use rice as a food source, and they use little chunks of moss as a symbiotic micro food source because they know that's what they eat in nature. But what they found repeatedly is that the charcoal, the yeast, and the springtails yielded the greatest population growth at the end of a 4-month time period. So these students this year got to use that data that last year's students gathered, and they're using that to inform this year's experiments. So they're able to use the charcoal and the yeast as a control in a lot of ways, or yeast as a food source that they know they grow from. And now they're asking lots of different questions, such as how does elevated CO2 affect the mosses and the microarthropods in the chambers? So we use the baking soda and the vinegar and blow balloons with enriched CO2 and either put in 2 balloons or 1 balloon or ambient air. And so they're going to see how those change over time. And we had all the students design a proposal, had to get okayed by the panel, all hypothesis driven, all controlled variables, trying to only keep one changing variable, but it doesn't always quite work out that way. But they get very excited about adding things like peanut butter, potato chips, and we do talk about how maybe that, you know, the smell of the orange rind in that closed container may also affect the springtails because they can smell. So a lot of really cool questions have come up, which are probably confounding, but that's how you learn. So you're gonna have to figure out what you're gonna collect. Is it color? Is it growth? Is it, let's see, what do you have? Liquid level. And then write those things down every week. And this one's gonna have.
Can we weigh the jars and how much is in there?
That's a good idea. Okay. And this is the first day that they're actually going in and figuring out how to flood their experiments or measure their moss and take different scaled measurements for things that can't be quantitative. Someone said, well, we have moss, but some of it's brown, some of it's green, and that's data, but we don't have numbers. So someone would actually made like a green to brown scale. You guys gave them choices. They chose to go over there. So they just dropped their springtails in the middle of the arena, and then they chose by scent which ones they wanted to go to.
This is honey. There's, last time there's still, oh my god, there's another one.
Our group put springtails in a charcoal habitat, and we changed the food source and saw how that affected the population.
I did my research question on springtails eat chocolate.
Our experiment was to see what smells springtails would like the most. Spider and lemon juice one, and then just the spider.
What we're testing is a pH's effect on moss growth.
In my group, we're putting salt, vinegar, and pepper, and we have 4 containers.
So we decided to change the level of CO2 in the jar.
It's like a little world that you get to like put in the parts for, and it's really cool because you get to figure out maybe this works and this doesn't.
If you have your habitat, whatever it's made of, moss or charcoal or whatever, when you add water, the idea is that the springtails will what? Pull it up. Good. So we should add a little bit of water to the bottom of these trays.
She's given me input and some suggestions on, and so we just kind of bounce ideas back and forth, and that kind of helps create the design of the experiment.
It actually verified that the way that I've been rearing springtails is the best way, because I kind of took a modified version of what I found in the literature and added many replicates that I would never have time to test to see if what we're doing is actually good for population growth, which it is. And I think that these questions this year are going to answer a lot of questions that we wonder. Like right now, we don't really even know if having a different variety of moss species changes the biodiversity inside of those bryospheres. And some of my students' questions are actually revolving around that. If a different composition of mosses changes the output of the microarthropods.
So the data they're generating is reasonable, useful data?
It is very reasonable because there's very little known about this system.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're even doing smell tests, which is the paper that we just had published in Nature. One of the really cool things about it is that we found that that mosses give off volatile cues, just like a flower does, and that springtails can sense those cues. This isn't something that I shared with them, but it's something that we're just exploring, and one of my groups designed an experiment, and they are making little extracts and putting them on moss patches to see if the springtails choose one scent over another, and of course their control is the moss itself. So I will be what we found is sex-specific differences in smell, but now what they're looking for is preferences in different composition.